Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Framing the Force here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Batts, and joining me every week to discuss a galaxy far, far away is Robby Weidemann. Robby, how are you doing?
Oh, it's a great time to expose these Jedi.
No agendas here.
Nope.
Yeah. So, I'm excited to get into it. I think that we've got a good topic here.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a juicy one.
Hell yeah. So this week we're diving back into the narratives of Star Wars with a discussion on the moral ambiguity of the Jedi. Let's kick off the show by breaking down an understanding of this topic as a whole. So, Robby, can you kind of explain to the audience where this discussion stems from?
I think it stems from the fact that the they're written as these gray, like they're written as these. They're supposed to be these, the good on the good
Hmm.
versus evil side of things, but they're flawed and they're purposefully flawed and they're it's really and it's kind of almost in your face, like from the not necessarily the get-go, but in episode 2 a line that always stands out to me from Yoda is how he's talking with it's a really like kind of just forgotten about scene, I think, in the movie and as in a general, but Yoda's walking in the halls of the temple with Mace and Qui-Gon, or Yoda's not walking, Yoda's floating, um with or not Mace and Qui-Gon, Mace and Obi-Wan, sorry,
Hmm.
RIP. um and they mentioning how Anakin is becoming arrogant and just like kind of full of himself and how he wants more with his power and whatnot. And Yoda's like, that is a flaw more common in Jedi nowadays. He obviously doesn't say
Hmm.
it more like that. It's a little more backwards and a couple different
As Yoda
words or
does.
whatever. But
Yeah.
um but basically it's a arrogance is a common flaw among Jedi that pops up more and more um throughout the last, I guess, few years, few decades, whatever the context Yoda was mentioning or whatever, in terms of his recent awareness to it. I mean, the dude's 900, so Lord knows what he considers recent. But
That's a good point.
yeah, so and I what I really liked about the acolyte was it was the first time we really see this line taken into a greater context, depicted uh more to the line more accurately, aside from Anakin. And you see that the Jedi depicted in the High Republic, they're depicted as Jedi are, like they're helpful to the public, they're nice to the citizens of the galaxy and everything, and they kind of hold this they're held to this pedestal. But they also, like, the decisions they make, the things they say, their reasoning behind things, this does have that arrogance to it.
Yeah.
And so I think in terms of Yoda mentioning it recently, it's probably within the last 100 years he's probably referencing. But I think they've strayed far from what they were or what they are and their core religion, like the core values of their religion,
Hmm.
um, way before they are like soldiers in a war. And I think that is where a lot of the discussion comes up, is like, when did these guys just become like, I don't know, full of themselves? Like, where did that arrogance really start to take that front facing thrust it into the limelight,
Yeah.
So it's I love that line in episode 2 because I think it's really accurate, and I love the acolyte's depiction of Jedi because of how it fleshed out that line in episode 2, and they're not really necessarily all that good of good guys.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot here that's super interesting. One, as you said at the top, the Jedi are presented as the good guys, right? Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, they're the good guys who are fighting evil. It's the light side versus the dark side. Like, that's the thing, right? That's the
It's
base
very black
presentation
and
of.
white. It's
Yeah, it's not.
presented.
There's not any nuance in that. Like, if you just take it at the face value thing.
Mhm.
But to your points. in practice, there is a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of gray area, which I'll say this at the top: gray Jedi are not a thing. I strongly dislike that idea. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of variety that you get there, and I do think there's a couple things that are interesting. One, the idea they're presented as the good guys, and I think a lot of what happens with the Jedi after a certain amount of time, which granted, not that we've necessarily seen the like early days of the Jedi, right? Like we don't know exactly how all of it started. But you do get the feeling that even by the time of the High Republic, they've kind of swayed a little bit from being the good guys, and it's more of a like we're the good guys because we're the Jedi,
And
and
we
not
won that
we're
Sith war.
Jedi because we're good. You know, like
Mhm.
it's not like it's
They
like
got too comfortable.
yeah, it's just it's well that, but also just the idea that like because they're a Jedi, they're automatically good, and not
Mhm.
like through the actions, then making like and then also being a Jedi. So I think that's an interesting thing, and it's the kind of like, well, we can't do wrong because by being a Jedi, we're doing the right thing. And I think that's something that not everyone in the Order obviously agrees with, but that is a general stance that the Order does like build for itself and take for itself. That like, well, what we're doing is right because it's the Jedi way, like, and the Jedi are good, and that's something that they don't really let be investigated that much. You can see that in the Acolyte with how they're, the council is operating and keeping things from the Senate and stuff. Um, so I think that that idea is really interesting. I also do think, yeah, I mean, the idea of like it is a religion, like they do, it's straight up called that in the original trilogy, and it's something
Yeah.
that they move into it and out of it kind of not super consistently, I guess, but I do think it's really fascinating to look at it through that lens because it's a really interesting religion if you like
It's
do fully
they
go
call
into
it a
that.
religion, but they practice like a cult.
That it's odd because I also, which I mean, that gets in the
I mean,
whole like
they're
what's the
very
difference between a religion and a cult
yeah.
in the first, but like right,
Right.
there's that conversation, but like when does a religion move into cult like territory and vice versa? But I think that as a religion, you look at it, and at least the way that I look at it, the closest direct comparison that I can think of is like a Buddhist religion in the
Mhm.
sense that like there's not like yeah, there's Buddha in Buddhism, but it's not that he's revered as a god because like the Jedi don't have a god really. Like
Mhm.
the Jedi, if they're gonna worship anything, which again I
It's
don't
just the
necessarily think that
force.
worship, yeah, would even be the correct like term to use there. But yeah, it's the Force itself. It's like life itself, and so it's a more of like which obviously like you can very clearly see the Buddhist inspiration and influences there, and a lot of like Eastern philosophy just in the Jedi to begin with, like balance and all of that kind of stuff. So I do think it's really interesting to look at it from that angle and kind of explore it in that way and see in what ways it is a religion and in what areas you can draw kind of the comparisons to religions that we see in the world and how they play out and their
Mhm.
practices and things like that. Um, so I think that that's something that does get explored to pretty decent lengths in various like books and the movies and TV shows and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I do think that I think the Jedi are the most good when they really are sticking mostly to that like when they're hewing as close as they possibly can to the clear like Buddhist inspirations and that like just being like the peaceful like I'm just about the world and like life and experiencing that and like studying that and like learning and like helping people while I can, but like
Right.
I'm not going to like overtly force anything. And like that kind of thing. It's when they start getting, as you were saying, more arrogant and more like we should be in charge of whatever or making whatever decisions or we have the final say over something because we are at this enlightened path, which that's another thing is that you can very much read the Jedi archetypes, not the right, the Jedi like path as a like you can see the direct parallel in like the path of enlightenment. It's like you go
Mhm.
through obviously the trials and like become a knight and then a master and like a
Right.
grandmaster, and it's you the very big thing and like the
Whole life commitment
visuals and the
and everything.
yeah, the like motifs that you get is that like when the higher you or the further you get on this path, the more like enlightened and one with the force you
Right.
become, right? It's like one with existence and
You
that kind
learn
of
more
thing.
things the more of a like, the more you master it's just like anything that you commit your time to.
Yeah, and so I don't remember what my original thought there was, but like you
Enlightenment.
do yeah, you do definitely like see that and but it's something that does kind of get like different you see different Jedi not fully get that and they start to go slightly off kilter and say, okay, well, oh, I remember. They'll take that enlightenment. They'll take that like, hey, we have a deeper understanding of the universe or of life or whatever, which may be the case. Like you can make the argument that that is what's happening for them, but then they'll use that as justification for because of that I know what's right, and because of that my word is law, and that's not exactly like you can't make that leap. Like that's not a one to one thing that you can do. It's giving them that extra like cachet that they don't really like have. And I think that that's where a lot of the trouble like comes into play. Um, so I think that that's a really interesting thing that we get in there. As you were saying, I think the High Republic is a really like huge focal point, and I think that it's cool that we've gotten such an exploration of them there because it is billed as this like Jedi in their high like at their peak. Like this is them operating the best that they can be and should be, and still even seeing the flaws in their operation there, I think is really telling and like very much forecasts their eventual fall. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I know, obviously, I was going to be like, what do you think about like whether or not they're like good guys or not? I know you don't think they're good guys at all.
But no, my whole thing is they haven't like once they like reach that there's no Sith threat. Like
Hmm.
they're kind of they got the High Republic little the Nihil. I
Nihil,
can't,
yeah,
I
it's
can't
the
remember.
Nihil.
Yeah, I know it's
I only know because
Martian Row.
I've heard it so many times where
Yeah,
it's
I couldn't remember I couldn't remember what exactly what it was called. But yes, the storm. I know
Mhm.
those guys.
So good.
Yeah, but so they have that, but they're like in the Jedi's eyes, even though they're a threat, and don't forgive me because I have not caught up on the High Republic. I've only done phase one,
Same.
but so this is just me speculating. Um,
Mhm.
but I feel like they wouldn't view them as a threat because they don't like at the end of the day, one is got the force with them and one doesn't. And I think that's
Yeah.
how they boil everything down to. And they kind of have this like elitist perception, like they're
Mhm.
superheroes almost. And at that point in time, the Sith are air quotations extinct.
Yeah.
So with them being extinct, they have this free reign to, I guess, just force users. You know, there's no other side to choose.
Mhm.
And because of that, they either, take you on, or like if you're not practicing the force their way, you're
It's wrong.
automatically wrong. You're
Yeah.
to be punished for it. Uh, Lord knows what that punishment entails, but we saw it with the witches in
Mhm.
the acolyte, and it goes for like it's before those witches were a thing. Like anyone, like that's just how they were. If you're not a Jedi using the Force, you're an outcast. You're fallen in some kind of way. Like you're just lost the path. Like you've strayed from the path. You've lost your way. So they have this very elitist mentality where it's like it's them or the highway.
Yeah. It's a
So
really
yeah,
you can
it's
definitely see the, like, religious war. I mean, obviously, it's very clear when it's the Jedi fighting the Sith, and it's these 2,
mhm.
like, things, but it is like, the Jedi win that war, and then it's them saying, "We're gonna keep it where," as you just said, "it's our way or no way." Like, it like
And they're so controlling with what their way is because
Mhm.
you're not allowed to have that passion or that like emotional connection. Like make you suppress it. And at that point, like we see what happens with Anakin. We've seen what
Mhm.
happens with I mean, there was 20 other Jedi that left the order at that point.
Mhm.
And like, just the answer to so many problems with the Jedi is one, like, either let them do those little natural, like, things. Those are just normal instincts.
Mhm.
Those are natural instincts. You either let them do that or you have a goddamn therapist on hand in the temple.
Yeah,
Like
I saw the tweet earlier that was, like, the amount of tragedy that could have been avoided if the
yeah,
Jedi just
exactly,
had
like,
a therapist, like, a licensed therapist on call. Like
it's like it's so simple, like, just let them, like, Yoda just says to Anakin, like, shit happens, man. Just gotta let it go. Move on.
Yeah.
Go about your day. Like next, on to the next one. Like next
Mhm.
problem. Like go conquer that now. Like you don't even get it. Like you say you what's like bothering you, and you say if what's bothering you very vaguely because you can't
Mhm.
like overstep and cause any serious problems because that's already frowned upon to begin with. Then you're
Right.
coming to them with these problems instead of being at enlightenment at peace and not meditating on it in the process. Instead, you're going out of your way to go talk to someone instead of meditating on it, which is the first red flag in the Jedi's eyes.
Yeah.
You go out of your
They
way
said,
and
"Keep that shit in, bro. Let it
yeah,
bottle up."
yeah, exactly. Just sit there with it. Sit with your thoughts for a few minutes, let it sit, marinate. End of the day, you'll probably be fine. You
Yeah.
most likely deep down underneath you won't be, but you'll forget about it. Don't worry about it. But so instead of bottling it up like you're supposed to in the rule book, you go and you go and bother someone else about it, and they're like, "Bro, let that shit go, man. It ain't
Yeah.
that deep." Like, but like that's just not how it's just it's suppressing natural instincts, which is it's the first problem. Like that is a huge problem. And
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to hold like at some point something is going to snap and it
Yeah.
does.
So I think that it's ironic that their problem is both being too rigid and then also like being too rigid and too
Flowy.
hands-on and like enforcing things, but then also not
Like
being
not
hands-on
a care
enough
in the world
in the
like
right ways. Like it's this weird thing where they end up getting the worst of both outcomes.
yeah.
Um, I do also though, it's tough because like I with the Jedi mindset, and this is actually why in recent years, like original like a long time ago, or for most of my life, I would always be like, oh yeah, I'd be a Sith for sure.
Good man.
But in the
What
last
happened?
like 5 or so years, I am not on that train. I very much would be a Jedi. The caveat with that is that because I lean towards the Jedi side of things now because I very much agree with the ideal that some of the Jedi get to, and some of them exemplify in the fact, and like it's repeated, and that kind of like, hey, like things will work themselves out, and it'll be fine, and don't stress yourself out about stuff that you like can't
I mean, I
control.
live by that philosophy. I can't even
Yeah,
lie.
because like I literally like stoicism is a
That's
huge
how
thing
I
for
that's how
me.
I am.
Like stoicism is what it had a ridiculous impact on my life, and one of the main things in that, and when you practice that, is understanding the things that are and are not in your control, and accepting that, and just not letting the things that are not in your control just completely wreck you and absolutely
Mhm.
derail you. And like that's great. Like if you're, which also way easier said than done.
It's
Like
gonna
right,
become a philosophy episode.
oh, 100%. But like, which is way easier said than done. But the other side of that is it's not like there can be a misconception that happens there whenever you say like, oh, you just have to accept things as they are and like not, and like just like go with it. And that's not, and people are like, oh, okay, you can hear that and you can say, well, then that like people will read that as being super cold and callous and like stoic a lot of the times now is thrown out or like compared to someone who's like cold and unfeeling and just like nothing gets to them. That's not the case. It's the idea that you
You gotta process it.
yeah, you feel those things still, like you just don't let them
It's not a
control you.
reflection of you're not gonna put whatever the problem is back out there. You're gonna deal
Yeah,
with it
exactly. Like
yourself.
you'll
No,
like
I
you do
totally
still.
understand what you're saying, dude.
Yeah, like, you still have to feel those feelings, like, get upset, get mad, get
Mhm.
whatever the thing is, but, like, don't let it
Conquer it,
just.
move past it. Every day's a new day.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing that the Jedi don't necessarily explain that well
Yeah.
to their friends and to the fellow Jedi, like, there are the people who get there and get to that point and, like, are able to
I
chill
mean,
in
look at
that
Qui-Gon.
range. That's what I was about to say, that's why
Well,
Qui-Gon's
he's
my
the Star
boy,
Wars
like,
character I identify with the most. Like of
I love
every
Qui-Gon.
single Star Wars character, I like I think I am the way I am because I've watched The Phantom Menace too many times, and he's, like, got 40 minutes of screen time in that damn film.
Can there be too many times for watching The Phantom Menace, though?
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Never.
Um,
Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. But no, he is we all know he's the most perfect Jedi, but,
mhm,
like, he knew it, he did it right, like, you have to just take the hits as they come,
mhm.
but it's okay to feel those hits,
Yeah,
but don't let it take ruin your entire day, your month, your week. Don't let it take
right.
you down with it.
But at the end of the day, like, still turn towards the light, right? Because
Right.
it's the light, like, that's the whole
Like,
thing, which is
you've
cool.
gotten this far. What's one more little inconvenience, you know?
Yeah, so I think that definitely that's why I 100% align with them now, but it's that, like it's them
No, I can
as
respect that, but
the
wrong.
way that they, like, should be and should be operating, and not necessarily the way that they do operate and how they kind of fall apart and crumble a little bit. But with that little tease, when we return, we'll be diving into how the Jedi's morals wavered entering the prequel era. So we'll be right back.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Kate.
And I'm Alex, enjoying this show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Bending the Narrative.
We're your one-stop shop for all things Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Each week, we break down an episode from the series and discuss our favorite moments, with a particular focus on the characters and narrative threads that tie the series together.
In addition to discussing the original series, we're also tackling things from The Legend of Korra to the novels and the comics as well.
Now, join us as we travel into the world of Team Avatar and discuss one of the greatest animated series of all time on Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Framing the Force. Before the break, we discussed the moral ambiguity of the Jedi, particularly how they were in the time of peace during the High Republic. Now, we want to discuss how this shifted as we entered the prequel era and the Clone Wars. Robby, let's start with you. How did the Jedi get to this point?
Like I said earlier, I think it all pins down to wherever that, like, arrogance comes in.
Hmm.
So I guess wherever that is, like, that's the real start of it. But I think you could also, if this moment in time happens later than when they started becoming arrogant, I think you can put a strong contender to whenever the hell they started bringing in, like, infants and only infants and taking them away from parents.
We don't have a
I
specific
don't think there's, like, a set time
time
when
when
that
they
started
like
happening,
are
but
like, hey,
whenever
you got to
that
be like
started happening,
3.
like, because there was, like, I think it's implied in the Acolyte that, like, Osha is taken in at a later age, but, like, there was no issue with it, I don't think, when that happened. Like, I don't think it was, like,
Yeah,
as bad as frowned upon, so I think they were a little more loose back then. So whatever, I'm gonna say, for
in those
argument's sake,
300 years
somewhere
somewhere
between somewhere between the Acolyte and the Phantom Menace,
when they
they
started
took a
recruiting
serious
infants.
downward spiral, and we're like, "Nah, we're gonna get, if you're older than 2, we can't have you here. No, not allowed into the club." Like, whenever that shift happened is where it went wrong.
Yeah, because I think
Like,
that that just
no, go
feeds
ahead.
into their way of practicing the Force and learning the Force is the only way, and so they're like,
Mhm.
"We're gonna monopolize people." They're like, "We're gonna monopolize everyone
We're
that
gonna
can
get a
use this."
stranglehold on everyone who's even just remotely close to being able to move something with their finger without touching it. Like,
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, that's definitely not the best, choice that they could have made, I don't think. I also,
and
like,
it's just like it imply, like, straight up is brainwashing at that point. Like, more or less, like, you're taking them away
yeah,
to morph them to your ideas.
yeah, which is not great, and like, the tough part about it is that because you can make the argument on their side, I'll play devil's advocate here, that,
No,
like,
yeah, I get
if
you.
you are bringing in a child and you're raising them with the good ideals of the Jedi, like, you can argue, like, that's a good thing, like, if they do lean in and they do become this virtuous person and they are an exemplar of the order, right? Like, that's a good thing, but it's, like, at what cost? Like, do they have
I
a
don't think
choice
it's
in
a
this?
I don't think it's
Like,
awful if the parents volunteer, but, like, they fall on just, like, Nah, nah, he's mine now. He's got too many metachlorians, man. Give him over here. That's my kid now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's not great. The one that just straight up like recruiting infants in the first place is not the best thing, but then I think it gets more messy whenever they get involved in a whole ass war.
Yeah,
So
like when they're no longer keepers of peace, which is like, how
that's
do you
another thing
even
though. That yeah, I'm glad you were about that. Like how you even define that. Like what is a
how
keeper of peace?
how do you like, other than just just straight up literal meaning from the words you get, like
Yeah.
they're like a self-titled keepers of peace. I mean,
Yeah.
it,
And the other thing too is that, like, it's a paradox in itself. Like, how are you going to if you're going to forcefully keep the peace, then
right.
that's not really peaceful. Like,
Yeah, like
it's not
if you're gonna whip out your laser sword to kick some butt to get your point across, man, how peaceful is that?
Yeah, which that's something that even in the High Republic, we
I
saw some of the
understand
public
you're like
perception
a
about that.
I understand you're like a, I guess for a lack of better description, like a police force on crack.
Yeah, see,
Like,
that's the other thing though, because 'cause they're trying, like, not to be is the thing, because they 'cause they're trying to have it both ways. They're trying to be the
they're just
keepers of
greedy,
peace for
man.
the Republic, but they don't want to be involved in the justice system, right? Like, they're not trying to be
Like,
like,
they
they're like,
want to
"Oh,
say
the
out of
Senate."
Senate proceedings,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, the Senate decides whatever, like, we are just they
So
want to run
who gives you
parallel.
the right to decide to enforce the law?
That's why everything gets super messy,
It's
because they
so
just do it. Like, they run parallel to the actual established
they do
government.
what they want and only what they want.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're a separate entity, and they can but even then within the order, like, there's
You sup
organization
Yo,
kind of,
how do
but not.
people support these this what is I mean, let's listen, the Sith ain't no saints, don't get me wrong, they be killing people for fun. However,
Mhm.
this is your competition? I mean, come on, they're killing people too with, I mean, probably for a good reason, more or less. Not all the time, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
I
know.
think that that's why you get where you are able to get the compelling arguments from the Sith, because they're like, "Well, why are they the ones that get to
Mhm.
decide good? Like, why who made them, like."
Like, we're like, the Sith argue we're also trying to seek that same enlightenment and that same, but they describe it
Well,
in
it's definitely not the same enlightenment.
right. They're but well, they're trying to get, like, the
Their
maximum
version
level
of their
of
enlightenment,
right,
yeah.
yeah, they're still trying to reach that supreme, like, fully enlightened by their definition.
Mhm.
They look at it more as a power, and the Jedi look at it more as a knowledge, but, like, honestly, if you're gonna teach yourself all that just to quote unquote keep this peace, you're probably going to have to whip out some of that power that you've taught yourself. So, what's the difference in calling it power and knowledge when the only difference is power is always associated with greed and being on top and being the bad guy, being the bully, like,
Mhm.
just that consumption and that thirst for it. But at the same time, I don't know, like, yeah, the Jedi don't always just whip it around when they want to, but these are the same people that mind trick civilians to get what they want.
Yeah, which that's a whole other the Jedi mind
Like,
trick is
that's what
a,
I'm
like,
saying, man. Like, if
huge
it's
ethical can of worms.
at the end of the day, they're these superpower wielding people walking the streets, and just because they have the favor of the Senate and they more or less try and do the right thing doesn't mean they should get this passed now, because they have some pretty rough things going on behind the scenes, and not even behind the scenes. Some of it's just straight out and about. Like,
Yeah, that's actually I'm really glad that you brought up the Jedi mind trick, because I hadn't even thought about that much, but that's a
yeah,
huge, like,
let that one
ethical, like,
marinate for a
can
second, Alex.
'cause I love, telepathy and stuff. There's a comic I'm reading that's coming out now called the Power Fantasy, and it deals with superpowered people, but, like, one of the guys is a telepath. He's, like, a crazy powerful telepath, and, like, it's exploring those ideas in an interesting way, but I think the idea of, like, can telepathy in any form be ethical? Like, is any use of that ethically sound? Like, I feel like you can make a strong argument that it's not, no matter what. You
Hmm.
can put a situation together. You could do, whatever.
You don't think
version of the
moving
trolley
like a
problem you
are you
want to do of like
quick question. Are you
mm,
talking like when you say telepathy, are you talking like the just the mind to mind stuff? Or are you saying
any
it in like
form
a
of so
can I just move something? Like can I move a cup that's on a table across the room to my
so
hand? Is that ethically wrong? I'm
that's
curious.
that's telekinesis, not
Okay,
telepathy.
okay. Thank you. Okay, that's what I was trying to
Telekinesis is
clear up. Okay.
moving objects. Telepathy is any mental like stuff between
Gotcha.
two
Okay, cool.
participant. Telekinesis, yeah, I feel like there's not a lot of ethical stuff there. Like it depends on
Great,
how like
great.
if you're stabbing people, then yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but no, for like telepathy, I think that you can set up interesting things where it's like, okay, is it ethically sound to use a Jedi mind trick to stop the dude from flipping the switch on the Death Star and blowing up a planet? Like, well, on the one hand, you're saving an entire planet. On the other hand, you're violating this dude's autonomy, and that's not ethically sound. So, like, I think that's an interesting thing if you want to blow it up to like ridiculous proportions.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Jedi mind trick is super messy, especially in like all of the applications that we see of it, because it's
Yeah.
always used for really menial stuff. Honestly, like it's not used for something that's that severe. It's a really just low level. You didn't need to do that, and you're just invading this person's privacy and autonomy. Um, so that's
Yep.
super messy. But the other thing that's not related to the superpowers strictly, but back to the whole child recruitment thing, um, they have child soldiers for an entire war, and
Yeah.
that's not great. That's so like the Jedi do end up becoming not just keepers of peace, but straight up soldiers in the army
Yo,
of the Republic. They become generals commanding the battlefield, and that I think is a radical departure and change from the Jedi Order as the Jedi Order that it was for thousands. I don't know how the timeline actually of Star Wars, like how
it was a
long in
couple
the past.
thousand.
I feel like it's thousands. I'm just
Yeah.
that sounds right. Like, um,
Good guess.
but like that's a huge. Which I mean, I guess if you go back into like the Jedi and Sith wars, like they were an army then as well.
But I like to
Um,
think of those wars. I feel like there were so many Jedi
mhm.
that you had enough to volunteer to be your warriors and your
Yeah,
soldiers and your fighters, while
that
you had
also
other
feels
ones
like a.
stationed at temples, like just doing their normal Jedi things there if
Mhm.
you need them. But I feel like were big enough that they had just those volunteers ready to do the right thing in
Yeah,
their eyes.
I also feel like the general context of those wars is a lot different than the context we get with the Clone Wars,
Right.
especially considering the fact that they're being manipulated because they're a bunch of dummies. But yeah, I mean, like the fact that they just are employing or deploying child soldiers is not great, and being generals in this battle is also not great. I think that you definitely, I mean, you do have the movies talking about that and the different things that like will comment on the fact that they have strayed a lot, and like this is not what the Jedi were supposed to be doing. That doesn't change the fact that they did it.
Mhm.
And I
Like,
mean,
"Ah, damn, shouldn't have done that." Well, here we are.
like one of my favorite interactions in the Clone Wars is between Ahsoka and Rex on the bridge when she's like, "The Jedi are supposed to be keepers of peace, and like all of my life I've been a soldier. Like that's all I've known." And
Mhm.
like that sucks so hard. Like that is, I can't like that's how she grew up. That sucks.
Yeah.
Um, and that really like puts it into perspective. And then of course you get the from Rex being like,
I
"Oh,
was
the only
born
reason I
for it.
exist
Yeah.
is because of this war. Like without this, I wouldn't be here," which is a whole other can
Mess.
of worms. Yeah, with the clones and all of that stuff. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just really not great that you have them leading the war and the because like it just really feels like it's not something that they should be doing as an order, like as yeah, it doesn't feel like a Jedi thing in the sense that you would think that it should be. Yet that's what they go to do.
Like, and
um,
just think about how screwed they would be if they weren't led into a trap to fight the war. Like, what if what if Sidious was like, eh, or no, I'm sorry, Plagueis was like, the Jedi don't need an army. They can just, they'll be fine.
oh yeah,
Like, they were struggling with millions and millions of clones being cranked out.
yeah,
They couldn't keep up with the droids. The droids were cranking them out even faster because it's way easier to crank out a droid than it is a clone.
hmm
And not to say that the droids would have a real easy time taking out like thousands and thousands of Jedi. That's why the clones were there, because they were that piece of the puzzle that was needed to wipe
Mhm.
them all out in one shot. Not saying the droids would have done that. However, like in terms of just war, like separatists, they would have won eventually. They would have overthrown the Republic. They probably would have beaten the Jedi at some point, or at
Yeah.
least brought those numbers down real small, because Grievous was a thing.
Yeah, the
And
interesting thing about that though is that like it's I feel like you can't take away the context of the fact that it's a fake war to begin
oh
or an
yeah, no,
orchestrated
a
war to
hundred
begin
percent.
with.
No, for but like that, that just goes to show you, like, why are they even fighting
Yeah,
this?
it's just like they're in the wrong this is not what they should be doing. It's the
Like,
whole like
you wouldn't
which
be
I don't
doing good
even
either. Like, regardless, let the Republic handle. Just make more clones.
yeah, it's one of those things where
I don't know, it's
it's
just a mess.
the
They just backed themselves into a corner with nothing to do.
it's taking the change from being like a monk, which is such a again paradox, but like a monk like warrior order where like they're kind of, patrolling the galaxy or whatever, and they want to present as being this like enlightened and peaceful people, but will then whip out the laser swords if they need to and be this warrior, combatant thing. And that's not to say that that's super ethically sound, but like it aligns much smoother with their ideals of being like, hey, like we'll fight when we have to, we'll use our weapon for defense or to defend the defenseless, but we're not going to take that extra step of aggression. It's like the like no, I forget the exact name that they use for it, but like the ascendancies policy of like they won't attack
They
first,
want to,
right?
yeah, they want to attack first unless attacked.
Yeah, and so it's that kind of policy that the Jedi are operating under for, most of their existence, and they're,
Self
you
defense,
know
baby.
yeah, like, and they're these, monks going around the galaxy, and like, yeah, they'll fight if they have to, and like if they're gonna fight, they're probably gonna wipe the floor with whoever else is like on the other side, but they don't take that extra step. Whereas when they're openly in a clone war, you have them drawing up battle plans and like generals on the battlefield and that kind of thing, and just taking it to that extreme, and that kind of just completely blinds the order and just makes to where
They
their
got way too
goal
locked in.
their goal in the Clone Wars is not about making the Jedi Order a better Jedi Order. It's about winning the Clone Wars, which is
the
not what
whole,
the Jedi should be.
I think like the whole reason they really got themselves knee deep into it, or one of the reasons, is because they have a Sith Lord on the other side.
Hmm.
So like they're so wrapped up in this war because they're so wrapped up in getting like, oh my goodness, a Sith is here. And
Yeah,
they freak out,
and we
which
gotta
is
stamp that out.
crazy because there's one of them and tens of thousands of them.
Right, yeah, but they're like, no matter what, this has to be dealt with. Like
But
this
it,
is the top
and
priority.
and that's the thing, like, yeah, they're right. The Sith are gonna do some crazy shit probably if they get control of the galaxy. They're
Hmm.
probably not wrong in that. However, like they get so wrapped up in it, and it falls back to the elitist thing that I brought up earlier, where
Yeah,
it's
no, it
it's
does.
not the your way, it's the highway, and
If
they're
they
like,
could have just
oh
chilled.
shit, we got one guy who is an op, who is a like bad blood, old history. One of them popped up. One, we got this man outnumbered tens of thousands to one. Oh,
Yeah.
we gotta stop all we're doing. We gotta go for him right now. We can't have none of that. He can't be on the streets, not at all. Like it is just like they get obsessive, and like that's like, I mean, that's passion, no?
Yeah. It is. You're not wrong. Yeah. It's
So
like
I don't
they
know.
do let their passions kind of blind them, and they let their emotions blind them because they take the stance that no matter what, this is something we can't let happen. It has to be stamped out. Like they very much take a zero tolerance policy to any force user that's not a Jedi.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
does prove to be their undoing there. Um which is yeah, it's wild. They lost they lost sight of the ball. I think
They lost sight of the ball. They lost the war, and It didn't end well. It
No.
did not end well. But after the break, we're going to discuss the legacy of the Jedi in canon and where the new Jedi Order may take the identity of the Jedi. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Framing the Force. Before the break, we discussed the fall of the Jedi as a result of their morals wavering in the face of war. Now we wanted to discuss the legacy of the Jedi, particularly as it relates to Luke's views in The Last Jedi and where Rey will take the Order beyond Episode 9. Alex, what do you think is next for the Jedi, and do you think there's currently a balance in the Force?
Okay. One, I want to start out. Luke is 100% right in The Last Jedi in his arguments and the way that he constructs them and kind of tears down Rey's view of the Jedi. I don't remember his exact lines, but him just basically, saying the Jedi became too wrapped up in their own mythology and their arrogance, and they let a Sith Lord rise to
He
power
was
and wipe them all
spitting,
out.
man.
Yeah, dude, bars. Like he nails it, hits it on the head. That's exactly what happened. And it's what we've been talking about kind of this whole episode, right? Of the fact that they get too wrapped up in their arrogance and their self-righteousness and being so self-assured that they're doing the right thing and not stopping and actually examining what the right thing is, and instead just being like, we're the Jedi, we're doing what's right because we're the Jedi. That's not really how that works.
Comes with the
Like,
title.
yeah. And so yeah, I think that I think that he lays it out really well there and presents it to Ray in a fashion that will hopefully inspire her to rebuild the Jedi in a way that makes more sense and is more practical from an actual like ethics point of view, and like them being functional and a positive force in the galaxy and the things like that. Um, I don't necessarily. I mean, I guess that's kind of like what it's hard to argue against in any way, shape, or form that like the Jedi Order won't be coming back in some form. Like that
Mhm.
feels like that's just a not possible
It's
thing
you're
to
not having
happen.
Star Wars without the Jedi.
Yeah, like we're going to get a new Jedi Order, whatever that ends up being. But I do think that it will be more aligned with what I've kind of been talking about in the sense of getting to the more core ideals that the Jedi should hold in terms of how they should act, how they should try to interact with the larger galaxy, being less elitist in their kind of view of things. I think Ray will help with that a lot.
Mhm.
I forgot that she's a fucking Palpatine. But like, I was thinking like pre the Rise of Skywalker way being nobody, and understanding
No,
that
but I
like
still think she, the humble beginnings goes a
yeah,
long
exactly
freaking
right.
way.
Yeah, like she wasn't indoctrinated with the Jedi Order for the first 15 years of her life, right?
Mhm.
She had that normal person experience in the galaxy, and that will ground her in a lot of ways and it will make her more open to everyone in a way that the Jedi historically have not been. And outside of the like we're going to abduct you and brainwash you type beat, like they're open to that. Like if you got a high midichlorian count and you're under like
Hey,
3 years old,
man,
they're open
anyone's
to you.
welcome.
But if you're like over 10 and practicing the force in a way that they don't agree with, they're not open to that.
No, not a good thing.
So I think
Which
that Ray.
is no,
Sorry,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go no, no, go.
I was just so
I can finish this up in one big thought.
I think that Ray will be perfect for embodying those ideals in a better way. At least that's what I hope to see. I think that that would make the most sense. I think that's what's been set up for us to explore, and kind of the ground has been laid to a like get back to basics. Let's figure out what the Jedi should be and kind of interrogate that idea and build it up again. I think is what they're going to be leaning into. At least I hope. Um, as for whether or not there's currently a balance in the Force, this is a very fascinating idea to me to begin with, because the Jedi's idea of balance is not balance.
Mhm.
Like their whole idea that we have to stamp out the dark, just like fundamentally, that's not a balance. Then that's just not how that works. Like there has to
Choose
be
a
dark.
different word.
Yeah,
Please
like, right. Like you just you can't have balance there if you have nothing but the good guys.
call it
Like
peace,
the
man. Just call it what it is.
yeah, so I think that that's a whole like that's something that they're always chasing and preaching that is not practically a thing that you can
It's
get
not
to.
attainable.
Yeah, Which again, there's also the argument that like the ultimate forms of enlightenment and what have you would not are also supposed to not be attainable things. It's something
Mhm.
you're just constantly striving for. So you could read that like, oh, we're striving for like inner balance and that kind of thing. And I guess you could read that as like being able to balance your emotions and accept them and move through them and not let that destroy you and that kind of thing. But like as far as balance in the larger like scale of the galaxy and stuff, and whether or not that exists right now, post episode 9, no. There's not really any like as far as we know, there's not dark side users really about, and that kind of thing. And so like in the very literal the way that the movies and like the canon presents how they look at the light and dark balance, there isn't balance at the moment. There is peaceful victory, I'll call it, quote unquote, where like they have like people in the galaxy seem to be at a pretty decent place. The bad guys have been defeated, and
For
that kind of
now.
thing. Yeah, and so I think you get that. I don't think that that's balance. I think the balance happens in the conflict, and in that drama. And I think that's of course like why we will get more movies because like we will get that. Um, Something that I did want to mention, I don't even know how to smoothly like slot this in here, but it's just related to Luke and The Last Jedi. I saw the clip earlier that I see it every now and then, like making rounds on the timeline, but of Sam Witwer talking about Luke's characterization in The Last Jedi.
I did see that.
And
I've seen that clip, yeah.
yeah, where he's saying that he's one, I do like the way that I don't
I
have any
love how he
problems.
presents it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with the way that he presents it, the way that he explains it. He does a great job of verbalizing and articulating the points without being like, this is wrong, which I think is important. And
Mhm.
props to him for doing that. However, I will say that he does make not a leap, but a sidestep where whenever he says that if you have something happen off screen, like if you have a character change off screen significantly and come back, like that's inviting people to disagree with you about that character and who that character is, how they operate, and those sorts of things, which I do agree with that idea, like the fundamental idea that
Mhm.
if you are going to have this big gap and you're going to make a huge character change happen off screen where you don't see it, that is inviting people to disagree with you on that. My only point about this is that it wasn't the last fucking Jedi that did this. It was The Force Awakens. And The Force Awakens made him a hermit who abandoned everyone. Oh my god, I'm so sick of people throwing that complaint at The Last Jedi because that's not what did it. Anyways, I had to get that in there because I thought of that
Little
earlier in the
gripe.
day. Yeah, I almost made a post about it and I was like, no, I'll contain it. It's fine. And I'm glad that we have a
You're
platform where I
you're
can say
making
that.
this a real hard episode for me, man. You're making me talk about the Jedi. Now you're just coming at Sam. Crazy out here.
No, I think that Sam, like I said,
No,
it was well
I know what you
structured, but I
mean.
just like people always throw that critique at The Last Jedi, and I'm like, the movie before is the one
No,
that
no,
did
you're
that.
you're not wrong there. You're not wrong at all. I won't
Um,
I won't disagree there.
but yeah, so I think that that's there's that. But again, Luke's views in The Last Jedi, I think, are really self-aware and accurate, and I
Mhm.
think something that needed to happen. Um, I do think that's interesting about whether or not in the future the Jedi could potentially open themselves up more to emotion and like having passions and having love and that being an accepting thing, and like whether or not the Jedi will get to that point. I think it's interesting because I can't really think of any reason for Ray to be like staunchly against that. Like I don't, if she's the one who's going to be setting up this new order, like, yeah, they have the sacred texts, not that we know what's written in them, but I feel like there's not a whole lot in them that's directly like you can't have a relationship or anything like
Yeah.
that. And so I do think it would be really interesting to see that kind of, it would be a really, um, clear like dividing line in making these Jedi different from Jedi that we've seen before. If like we're able to see like I can't imagine seeing like a Jedi as like a couple like fighting on the battlefield, like just like completely like in like
Revenant
full.
Bastila.
Yeah, I mean that's of course immediately what I like thought of, but like that's of course not canon technically and all that stuff. But like,
Revan's canon. Hey, Force die
I
has a
mean Rev,
canon.
yeah,
Hey.
that is true. But like I think that seeing that would be a very clear distinction from the Jedi that we have seen in the movies, and would be smart of them to be like it's a really like clear, hey, this is a different thing, um these are not the Jedi as you know them, and that kind of thing. Where do you think the Jedi are going to go? Do you think? I mean, I know you're probably like they should just stay away,
Yeah, they should stay away.
but
But no, I do actually. Before I get to that, I do want to say I want to add one thing to the balance of force
okay, yeah,
that I think it's always going to be out of balance because whether it's by if you're looking for a darkness explicitly for a Sith,
yeah,
you're not looking at the force correctly
hmm
because the force is everywhere. Everyone's got it. It flows through everyone.
it's
Doesn't matter if
everything.
you
Yeah,
can wield it or not.
hmm
But at some point, that darkness will rise, whether it is the Sith or some just lawless faction like the Nihil. I can't pronounce
Nihil.
their name. Nihil,
Yeah.
Nigel. I don't know. The Storm. I'm gonna call them the Storm because I can't pronounce their name. I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. It's fine. Anyway, um, they're really cool though. I really do like them. I
The
promise.
end is nigh, and they're standing on top of the hill.
Nihil.
Yeah.
All right, that's our lesson for the week. Okay. Um, so like there is that darkness that will cause problems for the light, and the light are by definition the Jedi. So
hmm
like they are the keepers of the light. They are the ones who keep it up and and in their terms balanced. They bring it that life.
hmm
So I don't think the force will ever be in balance because the Sith are gone. That's just how I view it.
Yeah.
Um anyway, back to
There's
rebuilding
no
the
way.
Jedi.
Also, though, they before you get to rebuilding the Jedi, like,
Yeah.
there's no way they're actually gonna. There's got to be other Sith out there somehow. Like, we can't just straight
Yeah.
up wipe out the Sith. Like, there's no way.
I mean, they were blind to them for 1,000 years. Come on.
Yeah.
They're there. Like
Yeah.
stop being so comfortable, you know?
Right.
This is why we need to rebuild you guys.
hmm
But I think what Ray should do is just straight up look at Luke Skywalker's life and be like, this worked, this didn't work, boom, boom, boom. This stuff from the old Jedi worked, this stuff from the old Jedi didn't work, boom, boom, boom. There's your
hmm
rules. Like Luke didn't even become a Jedi. Luke started training to become a Jedi at 19 years old, and so did Rey. And look
Yeah.
how they turned out. Luke became one of the most powerful Jedi of all time.
hmm
Arguably like the goat of Jedi. Not my goat, but like but
He's not
like
mine. Yeah.
he's not mine. I'm not gonna give him those flowers. But a lot of people and just
I
just the powers
understandably
and
so.
like he has a claim to that title. Like he has a nice argument going for him.
hmm
So he's the peak. And when you're in the sequel trilogy, he's known as a legend. Like everyone knows what he's done, what he did. He wasn't a 2-year-old taken away from his parents. He
hmm
learned at 19. He loved his friends and his family. Like he made mistakes,
Yeah.
but he grew past them and he learned and he corrected himself, but he never let them steer him off of his end goal
hmm
or what he was trying to do, the right thing to do. So I think Ray needs to take just the Luke Skywalker story as like a foundation. Pop in the original trilogy on VHS, baby, rewind them all, hit play, see what happens, boom, you're good. Or just
Yeah.
ask R2 and 3PO because that's what happened in episode 6. Anyway,
Right. I think.
but
Yeah.
you just rebuild them. I think if you have Luke Skywalker as your template, and look, he saved his father who was pure evil because he allowed himself to love his family and his father and his
hmm
parent. And if Vader survives, he's redeemed, whatever. This is pure hypotheticals because we both know, you and I agree, he was on trial, never making it out to see the light of day. But like hypotheticals, like you could have him and Luke love each other, father and son, two of the most powerful to ever do it,
hmm
fighting for the light side by side. Why would you stop that? Why would you stop that from happening?
Yeah.
So like that, like you're just like making your ceiling infinitely smaller because then you also like if you take in a brother and like they're already gonna like it's happened. The Jedi Order has taken in siblings before, and they have a little extra connection because they are siblings, and you can't take that away from them. They're gonna know,
Yeah.
and it affects the way they grow up as Jedi,
Hmm.
like their emotions, and it takes a toll on them, and you just can't suppress those. Like I said, you can't suppress natural instincts. And I think if you rebuild it off of just that Luke Skywalker template, you can. I'm sure you can. There's definitely things you could take from the old Jedi because Luke like was instructed with the ways of the old Jedi. So there's going to be overlap and everything. It doesn't have to be a overhaul completely. But I mean, I think you
Hmm.
need to base a lot of the ideas and the concepts, and if you want to right the wrongs, start with what Luke did
Hmm.
on his path to becoming a Jedi Master. I think that's the best way you could restructure the order. I mean, you could just leave it alone and just never have it come back. That's also cool.
So that's fine. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but
that it comes down to being more of a like not that you wouldn't call it a Jedi Order, but like more of a Jedi outlook or guide. Like I think the two main things are both one being more open, as we were kind of talking about, and like not closing everyone out, and then also not stamping out everything on the outside like it's not a Jedi. But then also an allowance in the fact that like allowing people to make mistakes and learn from them and be better from them, as opposed to like, oh, you messed up one time and now you're excommunicated from the Jedi Order.
yeah, go
And like
meditate.
yeah, like it's a very harsh, like they're not, they feel very not welcoming towards redemption or the idea that someone can be redeemed or that like people can mess up and we should help them be better from that.
And
And
meanwhile, that
more
was
like,
Luke's whole thing. Like, I can redeem him. He can do it.
yeah. And earlier on it's more so them being like, oh, you messed up, you have to be punished for that because you shouldn't have made that mistake in the first place. That's not a Jedi thing to do.
Ooh, bring up the
Which
council, man. It's judgment
which
time.
yeah, so like it's just not, that's not a good way to run things or to
Hmm.
be. And
And,
so
and when you run things like that, it's going to instill fear, which is the one thing you're trying to just
to
completely
not to dispel, right?
rid.
Yeah. Because
Like,
then you're like, oh, I'm worried. You have the idea of like, what is the council going to think about
like,
this, or
it's in the back of
like
your
what
mind,
the,
and it's going to be clouding your mind. They're always worried. You got sense fear in you. Well, shit, you're putting it in the back of their heads the whole damn time. What do you
yeah, right,
think?
yeah, bro, I'm scared of you. Like,
Yeah,
come
like
on.
you are the problem, sir. It's not anything else. You're like, I am not going to pass my class because of you, professor. Like,
Yeah, so I think it's both an openness internally and externally, and then also an allowance of mistakes and others, and that kind of thing. I think are the two big things that would be super beneficial to a new order, as far as just being, just like chill out a little bit, maybe like just like be more okay with things and more tolerant
get
and
a
that kind of stuff.
therapist.
Which is also, it's wild to describe the Jedi as intolerant. It sounds like not accurate, but it is pretty accurate,
Yeah,
which is kind of unreal. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I'm excited to see what they like, how where they go in the future
yeah.
though, because
I'm also excited to see how they go backwards to see how if they're any better or if they're always like this.
oh,
I hope they are. I hope they're better.
yeah, dude, I can't. That's the other thing. Which that movie, I need it. I need them to start filming that movie because also James Mangold is great. Love him. That movie better happen. I swear to God. I'll
I want to see a proto saber.
I'll lose all of my every single thing in my head. It will
Every single
just
brain cell that's
explode.
left.
Yeah, it'll explode if we don't get that movie. Oh. Um, but yeah, I think those are most of my thoughts on it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add about the Jedi
The
besides the fact that
last
they
thing I've
suck?
got to say is, yeah, that's the last thing I got to say, man. They're not as good as you make them out to be, and that which in turn makes the Sith not as bad as they're made out to be, and that's all I got to say on the matter.
Yeah, I think that there's a few key highlights in their order, but on the whole, they got some problems.
They got some issues, man. They're not the shining light. They're a little bit gray over there. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
there's no
not
gray
black and
Jedi,
white.
but
There's
the
no
Jedi
gray
Order
Jedi, but it's not
be a
black
little
and white.
gray. Yeah, yeah. So I think that'll do it for this week. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in to episode 13 of Framing the Force. Robby, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at Robby_Weidemann. That's Robby with a Y _WEIDEMANN and at SW Shot by Shot.
Very nice. And you can find me online at the Alex Bats. It's BATTS, and also at One with the GIF for all the Star Wars GIFs. Please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. Follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Huge thank you to Peter Fraser for providing our series music. And again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in a galaxy far, far away. Hey, thank you for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this show, then be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect so you never miss an episode.
And check out some of our other shows and videos here on the Aspect Network.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in a galaxy far, far away.